ما استطعنا تأمينه اليوم هو مسألة جديدة طازة بنقول باللبناني. نتحدث عن البيئة، بعض المرات ننسى أننا في منطقة تأكلها الحروب والنزاعات. ماذا يمكننا أن نفعل؟ هل يفكر الناس في زرع شجرة حين لا يعرفون إذا كان لديهم سقف ينامون تحته غدا؟ إذا كان لديهم رغيف يأكلونه صباح اليوم التالي؟ من حسن حظنا أن أحد المتعاملين معنا منذ البداية حين بدأنا عمل أفد طلبنا في التقرير الأول أن تكون هناك تغطية لموضوع أثر الحروب والنزاعات على البيئة. وبما أنني عملت سابقا مع برنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة استطعت إقناع مدير شعبة النزاعات والحروب أن يخصص أحد أفضل العاملين معهم ليكتب هذا التقرير، وكان هذا منذ 10 سنين. اليوم حسن بارتو كان في الموصل وكان في فريق لإعداد تقرير عن أثر النزاعات على بيئة الموصل وكيف يمكن معالجتها. فحاولنا استغلال هذا الأمر لنطلب من حسن بارتو تقديم عرض خاص من 15 دقيقة عن هذا الموضوع. حسن من فضلك.
مساء الخير. أنا راح يعني هم لسبب الوقت راح أتكلم بالإنجليزي عمود أسرع في المداخلة. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be in the AFED forum, and congratulations to Mr. Saab for all the good work that he has done to the team, and for giving the time to spotlight the linkages between environment and conflict. Before going into the topic of this discussion, I'd like to say that the situation in Mosul is to a large extent symptomatic of the enormous environmental challenges which are facing many of the conflict-affected countries. What's I think a clear hallmark from these conflicts is that the environment has been a major victim. The environment has been exploited in the conflict itself. Indeed, in many cases, scorched earth tactics have been used to maximize the environmental damage. The other common feature is that many of these conflicts are city-based. So I could talk about Mosul, but it could be also about Raqqa, it could be about Aleppo and other places. But is that the urban environment itself has been shattered, and many of these sites obviously contain and generate, as a result from the destruction, a lot of rubble and debris, and also because they contain many hazardous sites that can create contamination. So the UN Environment received an official request from the government of Iraq to conduct an assessment of the areas that were occupied by ISIL. And it's based on this that 2 weeks after the liberation of Mosul on the 9th of July, UNEP deployed a rapid scoping mission to look and investigate, a kind of fact-finding of what happened. And there are four main issues that I'll discuss, and this includes chemically contaminated sites, both hydrocarbons and other industrial chemicals, the enormous amount of rubble that has been generated by the conflict, the cessation of environmental governance and education for 3 years, and also the weaponization of the water management infrastructure. And then I'll conclude just by highlighting some of the proposed interventions that UNEP, with the UN system, plans to undertake. So just for background, in red are the 5 governorates which were occupied by ISIL. Of course, the situation has now changed, and there's only a limited presence around Al-Qa'im near the Syrian border, where there's also military operations ongoing. So the mission was essentially focused around Mosul, because Mosul is really at the epicenter of one of the most complex and largest humanitarian operations ongoing on the world, with 1 million displaced people. It's also of major environmental concern given the level of destruction, the wide range and number of potentially hazardous sources, and the size of the exposed population. So we visited both the east and west banks of Mosul. We also went to the Gayara oil field and to the Mishraq sulfur complex. So on contaminated sites, sorry, the picture is maybe not very clear here, but this is the Gayara oil field. It's located around 60 kilometers south of Mosul. It straddles the Tigris River, and it lies immediately adjacent to the city of Gayara, with a resident population of 23,000 people. Now, out of the 90 oil wells, 25 were rigged by ISIL and detonated, out of which 18 caught fire. The fire broke out in June and lasted until the 28th of March in 2017. So a similar period to the Kuwait fires in 91. The smoke that was generated from the fires was so thick that it obscured the sun. And the people couldn't even dry out their clothes because of all the soot. And the local residents refer to these darkened skies as the Daesh winter. The oil flowed into the streets, and it's estimated that between 1.5 to 2 million barrels of oil were either spilled or burnt during this incident. Now, the most problematic sites were those wells that were exploded inside the informal settlements, which had encroached inside the oil field. And obviously scores of homes were burnt as a result, and people were intoxicated by the fumes. One big issue is that a lot of these homes were filled with soot, and the very fine particulate matter contains toxic PAH and heavy metals, which we were also found in the ground samples that we took. The neighborhoods are filled with these oil pools, and the inhabitants are complaining that they're no longer habitable because of all of the fumes from these pools and the smoldering fires that break out from time to time. Vast tracts of pasture and agricultural land was impacted, and the livestock was impacted. As you can see here, is covered in soot, and so it really affected the livelihoods also of the local population. The operation to put out the fire was extremely complicated because it was an active active front line. Daesh was only 9 kilometers away, and the firefighters were operating under missile and sniper fire, and the area had not been properly surveyed for landmines. So 1 firefighter was killed, and 4 were injured. This is a drone shot that was taken by the Ministry of Oil, and they had to kind of innovate and armor their equipment to withstand the severe heat. The oil flowed onto the land and into the wadis, in some cases virtually like rivers, and creating large pools of oil. In some cases, it reached within a few hundred meters of the Tigris River. The refinery was also struck, and many of the storage tanks melted from the intense heat. Now, this is one example of the oil fields. You can see that around many of the oil fields in northern Iraq were occupied by ISIL, and the same thing happened in many of them. The last incident was in Huwayja in early October, where the oil wells were also set on fire. The Mishraq sulfur complex is located around 45 kilometers south of Mosul. It has one of the largest, if not the largest, sulfur deposit in the world. And ISIL exploded bombs and vehicle tires in huge stockpiles of sulfur that were being kept there. And this released enormous amounts of sulfur dioxide, which scientists have compared to a small volcanic eruption. This is what burnt sulfur looks like. It has a unique blue glow, and streams of that was draining towards the Tigris River. It's estimated that around 35,000 tons of this pure sulfur was burnt and created a smoke plume that extended for over 200 kilometers. The Ministry of Health has reported that around 1,500 people were treated for suffocation systems. And a high-risk site in the Mishraq complex is this 2 million ton sulfur waste pile mixed with bitumen, which lies exposed to sabotage and accidents. In Mosul city now itself, there were many sites which were destroyed from military operations that contained hazardous chemicals like factories, workshops, and plants. And what was also very clear was that there was a systematic destruction of these facilities by ISIL, torching them and ransacking them. ISIL also built ammunition workshops in many of these. For example, in this case, it's a dairy plant or food warehouses. And when we took gram samples, we also found high levels of toxic explosive agents like hexogen. The electricity network in Mosul was, heavily impacted and destroyed. In the main electricity station supplying western Mosul, they shot heavy caliber rounds into the block of transformer stations, causing all of the PCB-containing toxic oils to leak into the basement, which filled it up to 3 meters deep. As I'm not sure if it's very clear here, but as shown in the picture. The transmission stations, which were all around Mosul, were also impacted, either directly because of the shooting or from the shrapnel, and caused the oil, which contains these toxic PCBs, to spill. And we found the levels were 5 times in excess of the intervention levels. Probably the most visible or overwhelming visual scar of the conflict is the huge amount of rubble that was created by the conflict. We did a preliminary assessment based on satellite imagery of the rubble generated, and we estimated that around 11 million tons were produced. Most of it is on the western side of Mosul, where the fighting took place. So just to give you a sense of perspective, 11 million tons is equivalent to 3 times the size of the Pyramid of Giza or 4 Eiffel towers. But moreover, however, this is likely to be an underestimate because, again, ISIL sabotaged many of the multi-story buildings. As shown here, they blew up the foundational pillars of these buildings, so they all need to be brought down. Now, of course, the Mosul municipality is overwhelmed by this situation, and their priority is to try to clear out the rubble and so that the people can return to their homes and rebuild their lives and businesses. But the approach that they're using is completely based on disposal, which is if they were to take out the 11 million tons of rubble outside of the city and dump it around 10 kilometers, it would be equivalent to 12.5 million kilometers traveled, which is the same distance between the Earth and the Moon 16 times and back. So major inefficiencies in terms of resources and raw materials and economic cost, not to mention the environmental impact. The real missing link here is the debris recycling. There's a need for a vision to manage this debris based on different recycling options, which we're trying to work with Mosul municipality. The other major problem in this debris is that it's contaminated with a high levels of unexploded ordnance. It's particularly booby traps. So this work also needs to be coordinated with the demining operation, and some of the rubble can also contain hazardous materials like asbestos. Now, what ISIL also did is that it dismantled the whole governance systems in the places that it is occupied. The Environment Directorate was disbanded, and 140 staff were dismissed from their work. The Environment Office in Mosul was transformed into a command center of ISIL, and before they were evicted, they torched the premises. And when we visited the site, it was filled up with chemicals, and we suspect that it might have been used as ammunition manufacturing workshops. All the assets of the Environment Ministry, a state-of-art laboratory that had been recently set up, the air quality and radiation monitoring network, its mobile vans, all of that was looted and also lost. I don't know. It's not working, or okay. The Mosul city, its university itself was also okay. I'll probably skip this, but just to say that also the environmental college in Mosul was also destroyed. The ISIL also used water management infrastructure as both a strategic and tactical weapon, and it basically controlled all the hydraulic infrastructure all the way from Raqqa, Tabaqa Dam, to Fallujah, west of Baghdad, and either they used it to cut off the water supplies, supplying the densely irrigated part of the Euphrates, or in some cases they opened the water and it reached up to Abu Ghraib, which is 20 kilometers from Baghdad. Now, in terms of our interventions, we're looking into the whole reconstruction process as part of the UN response for the conflict-affected areas, and we will be focusing on carrying out contaminated site assessments and emergency cleanup, supporting Mosul municipality in the debris management planning, and also trying to rebuild the environmental governance and green the reconstruction process, because it is also an opportunity to create efficiencies in construction and renewable energies. And this will be submitted in the upcoming Kuwait Donor Conference that is planned to take place in January next year. So before I close, I'd like to say that it's not all gloom and doom. There, I took this photo from the destroyed medical complex, which overlooks the city of Mosul. On one side, there was all the drab gray colors of the destroyed concrete and stones, and on the other, you had this, turquoise waters of the Tigris River, which was really a kind of uplifting, and a breath of fresh air. So I think, with the human will, there's still hope, and it's still a beautiful place. Thank you.